my gosh, hi, welcome to Lucy and Corey's Anti-Power Hour.
Welcome.
This is a new, relaxed Non Serviam.
Very relaxed.
Yeah. It's so relaxed that that's the intro. That's all it is.
You know, my favorite thing about us is that, and this show and the precedent we're setting, is that we're very diligent and timely. We don't take forever to finally meet up and record ourselves talking. We're just on top of it as soon as the opportunity arises.
But we will be now, because our entire personalities changed, and now we'll be prompt and organized.
Yeah, my personality changed.
Yeah, me too.
The second you clicked record, it was like, I'm a show host.
Well,
officially.
Am I? So yeah, what?
Am I a co-host?
Oh yeah, of course you are. And there are no guests because we don't like them.
Yeah, no guests.
I guess that's what it is. So we were just talking about. You were just ranting about YouTube ads about elections.
Oh yeah. Elections are coming up, and I don't know much more than that, but they're coming up, and I'm being barraged by Ron DeSantis ads on YouTube, just endless Ron DeSantis ads. Most of them making his opponent Charlie Crist out to be a fantastic left libertarian anarchist. I'm sure he is in reality those things.
Yeah, I forgot how perfect Democrats sound when Republicans are talking shit about them in ads. It's like,
open
wow,
borders.
What a guy. I know.
Police.
Imagination candidates are great. They're so good.
Yeah. I never vote, but sometimes they make me, it tricks me, and I'm like, oh, here, he's getting me to vote for his opponent.
Do you never vote?
No, I've never voted.
You've never voted?
No.
Dude, I didn't realize you had such pure anarchist cred. Because
I have so much anarchist cred. Did you not know this? Did you not realize?
I knew you had a lot, but not ever voting. You beat me, definitely. And I used to get real frustrated by people voting for Democrats. And my terrible secret is that I am really, really scared of Doug Mastriano. And I almost want to vote for Josh Shapiro, who sucks and is mediocre in every way. Like, they can't even spin him as some radical because he's like, I love the police. But I don't know, man.
I don't think there's anything wrong with voting. It's never particularly excited me. There might be?
Yeah.
Well, if it distracts from maybe more fundamental things, or people aren't aware, fall into defending all of the flaws and vices of the person they vote for. But you can vote in defense in a way. I don't bash it.
I mean, I'm kind of thinking of doing that, and I feel like I could make a defense of it being defensive, but I can't even decide in my mind whether voting is speech or aggression or both or neither or what,
I definitely don't think it's aggression. I don't like the libertarian arguments that it's aggression.
But you never vote. You've never voted.
But just not because of that reason. There's other reasons not to vote. If I'm busy that day.
That's a very Catherine Mangu Ward of reason argument, which I think is a little bit funny.
It's very reasonable. Yeah.
But why isn't it aggression though? I mean, not direct per se, but it
is a minuscule effect on everything. I don't see how you're not engaged in violence against someone else. But
you're endorsing someone who's going to, in most cases, going to do violence.
Yeah, that's true, but that's not violence. I mean, itself endorsing someone who, and you might endorse other aspects of them, the non-violent aspects, if those exist. Like if they really do want to open the borders, well, okay, then that doesn't seem likely.
I mean, that's true though. Then you just it can come down to what if someone is 82% amazing, and so you vote for them, but there's 10% where they're horrible on something. I mean, Does it all come down to like percentages and numbers? I don't even
No,
know.
no, but I think we're corralled into this system. I don't blame anyone for voting, just like I don't blame anyone um, for taking certain subsidies, say, from government. I mean, we all do that in some way. We drive on the roads. It's unavoidable to use public infrastructure and other things. We just think there's better alternatives to this system, but like we're all in some way forced to live under it.
Definitely forced, but voting to me seems more of a choice. Not the fact,
Yeah.
not the end result isn't a choice, but to engage in it at all is a choice.
No, right. It seems a little more, I guess, optional than like having to use a road to get to
And
your job. That is how you make a living or something.
yeah, like a symbolic endorsement, even, which
Yeah.
I don't know, very
But,
uncomfortable.
is that different from saying that there is like, I definitely preferred the Democrats to Trump most recently. That was kind of an endorsement. I didn't vote for them, but that's like making a vocal, acknowledgement of like one of them being preferred. I don't
Right.
know, but I'm not involved in any of the aggression. I'm not. That's the people that's the police and the border patrol and the prison guards. Those are the people involved in the aggression. So
I don't know.
if
It's
you
just
want to
like,
vote, you can vote. It's fine. We can keep it a secret if you want. No one has to know. The people watching this.
well, we'll see. I mean, I might be in Canada at the time, like some sort of communist. I'm not sure. Um, I don't know though. It's just that like if nobody voted, no one would win. And we'd all
No,
be
I
free.
do.
Not
Yeah,
really.
I kind of like. I think we should withdraw our support from the system. I agree with that.
But I mean, our last talk. The thing I remember about our last talk is that we talked about January 6th a bit, and we defended, especially you, but both of us, certain liberal norms, democratic norms, which was very scary to defend them. But I
I've been
guess,
known to. Again, it's better than the alternative that was on the table.
and just the fact that I think in America, especially people of our sort of demographic, the stuff that bothers us is institutional kind of stable stuff. And obviously, people in a lot of countries, what bothers them is corruption and instability. And like, that's more their daily life. So that's why I'm a moderate anarchist, a moderate radical.
Moderate radical. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think it's easy to transplant American centric context, as if there weren't these other institutional problems that other countries suffer. Um, and I do think it's easy to let radicalism blind you to, again, like, okay, we're forced into a system and the options are all terrible by our standards, but still one of the options might be better than the other. So liberal government is better than monarchical government, for instance. And it's strange that that even has to be said.
CC Hoppaites, apparently. My God.
Who?
Hoppaites?
I'm
Hoppians?
not familiar. I've
Hoppians.
never.
Can I get some of the drug you took to forget about Hans Hermann Hoppe and his followers? Because let me get a hit of that shit. Because
Yeah, sure.
yeah, yeah. I thought when someone paraphrased Hoppe's anti-democracy thing, I was like, wow, what an interesting thought experiment. That's a good point. And then I realized later that they actually meant, and that's why we're monarchists slash we want our HOA to be able to kill gay people or something. So like.
Well, that's the strange thing, though. In a way, those aren't they? They're two different things, right? Like, I think they think monarchy is the least bad form of government, but then they say that other system where the HOAs run everything and exclude, gay people and communists and everyone else. That's their actual preferred end state.
It
Which is just,
is.
and so that's kind of frightening. But
I think that's what people should point out about them more is that not only do they sort of fight for the right for localized tyranny, I'm pretty sure most of them prefer that. That is what
yeah,
they want. They just don't want federal tyranny or sometimes large state tyranny, but they want localized power structures. They love them. They love hierarchy. They love all those things. I feel like that is, I mean, they're not our friends, are they?
yeah, I think the the rise of the centralized national state in the past century or two has made people underrate the evils of localized tyranny that aren't
Absolutely.
necessarily better. So it's tough to oppose both and know how to navigate that. But it seems like, I mean, it doesn't negate the fact that some people seem to only oppose one half of that, the centralized nation state part. But then because it crowds out the localized tyranny part, too bad the small percentage of people who deny both are drowned
I
out.
mean, coming from libertarian circles, I feel like I get bogged down in these debates. Like, my oh, you know what? I don't want to call out anyone. Someone I know is very like, ooh, COVID stuff was so bad, state by state tyranny. But you should be allowed to decide. States, deciding on abortion stuff is fine. And it's like, why is that fine? I mean,
Yeah,
it's or
just
like
very
I don't.
selective federalism.
Or let's spend all our time like worrying whether the 101st Airborne should have been sent to Little Rock, Arkansas to desegregate the schools. Like, I think especially as anarchists and radicals, like, these procedural questions, I used to get bogged down in them more, and I feel like I shouldn't, An executive order from Obama that was protecting people from deportation is good. An
Yeah,
executive order interning the Japanese
yeah,
by FDR was bad. It's the
yeah,
same power that shouldn't exist. But this idea that a lot of people I know and respect still are kind of stuck with is that we have some obligation to object to the anti-deportation one because it comes from an overly powerful place, as if we pretend those are kind of the same thing just because they're executive orders. I don't know. It's very strange to me. Like
yeah.
it's cheating to be like, no, the end result where people are not aggressed upon is the point, not really the procedure at all. That's what we should care about.
Yeah. Lucy, I just got some sort of error. Is everything okay on your end?
Oh my god, yes.
Okay, it's still recording me?
Yes.
Okay.
We were very scared of our
I
the
assume Chris would just
technological
edit this
gods
out.
today have been cursing Corey. Cursing
Yeah, I'm
him.
cursed. Okay, that's good to know. But yeah, I agree. I mean, you can make the point that, right, the executive order shouldn't exist or it's a dangerous power. But why would it follow that, like, if you had that power, why wouldn't you use it for these obviously good aims?
Yeah. Or that
Um,
why you and I shouldn't support it being used for good aim. I mean,
yeah, it's not a power in the sense of power over someone. It's just a function that we think is dangerous, but in these instances, being used to decrease power over people, like protecting their deportation.
or like, should we be mad about presidents pardoning people because presidents are too powerful? No,
Right.
it's like, or like, or the last thing on earth, the last thing in government to cut, if you were cutting the government, would be public defenders. I would say, because that's directly a defense against the state, albeit an underfunded, very
Yeah.
stressed out one, according to people I know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, Better Call Saul was great.
I haven't watched that. I've thought about it.
I've thought
I,
about it too a lot since I've watched it. But that was good shit. What have you watched?
I mean, I did watch Breaking Bad, so I could certainly step into the Better Call Saul world.
Oh, it's very good. I was very skeptical, but I came around and watched it, and it really blew me away.
I mean, I think I'm inherently a little skeptical of prequels. It's true because
Mm,
there's an inherently sort of less interesting thing where you know how it ends, but you can still work
yes,
with that if you're good. God knows Vince Gilligan has proved that he's good at TV. So,
yes, it really prequels can be confining, and also we've been wronged by so many a prequel attempt
or
um,
sequels to
or
say,
sequel.
for example.
Yes, but it's very cool to hate prequels and sequels, but prequels and sequels can be really really fun if they're done right. And so Better
It's
Call Saul is a good example of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a joy whenever it's done right. It's true. So I have still been watching The Handmaid's Tale, which after Roe versus Wade was overturned, I was like, am I still going to watch this? And I was like, yeah, I am. because my
Yeah.
jam is depressing shit like that. It doesn't make me feel better or anything, but it doesn't make me feel worse either. Usually, it's just sort of
Hmm.
I just like to vibe and depressing stuff. That's just how it goes.
It's I watched a show with my wife Kelly. It can be very sadomasochistic feeling, especially now. We haven't watched the latest season. Is that what we watched
Uh,
up until I think the fourth season? But the new one we haven't gotten to yet.
yeah, season 5. I need to after this. Maybe I should watch the new episode. They're just. I feel like the show's really botching the redemption aspect of um, the character Serena, who is the woman who helped build this horrible society.
Hmm.
And the actress is so good that, and I think in a lot of the contexts, our protagonist was stuck in this situation, so she tried to identify with Serena and work with her. But I think the show really doesn't truly understand how culpable this person is, because she's a pretty white woman who cries really convincingly. It's
Hmm.
very strange. I like to know when a show knows its characters and knows if how bad they are. And I
Right.
thought the show knew, and again now I'm like, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. I I'm not up to date on that, I guess. But most of what I remember from the last season I watched was like this very um, kind of reveling in the revenge.
Right. It did end with some
And
serious.
I didn't necessarily see it as an endorsement or anything of, but also like maybe understanding its cathartic power to see that, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure about the show in terms of moral endorsement. I really enjoy it. It's just wonderful acting, and everything about the production is like so engrossing. So it's very fun for those things.
I mean, I'm just reminded that I've seen more people. I mean, this is probably just tweets that go by, but like people talking about they're getting tired of villains who get redeemed and get sloppily redeemed and things. And I feel like this show's sort of going in that way too. And I
Hmm.
used to love a villain redemption in real life and in fiction, but you can definitely do that really lazily. I mean, I think the Star Wars sequels did that absolutely. Um,
Uh, yeah. Although the question of the original redemption of Vader, of if that was done well.
well, that's debatable. I mean, but that's fun debatable because I think there's some nuance there. Um, Maggie McNeil on Twitter, random shout out, was saying that back in 1982, which I was not, we weren't alive for, she was bothered by the attempted redemption of Vader, and I always thought maybe not the Force Ghost part, but Vader is this like broken figure, and his last words are like, or near last words, I can't remember, it's been a little while, are like, "Tell your sister you were right," and it's delivered very well with the acting, like hopefully you were right. I blew up her entire planet, so you probably weren't right, but this wasn't, bad guy did one final thing before he died. And tell your sister you were right isn't a declaration that Luke was right and that Vader was truly redeemable. It's just like a human hope. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't want my bringing up that redemption to be taken to mean I'm not a fan of it. I'm a huge fan of it. I love the originals and Return, and the redemption scene with Vader is among my favorite in those movies, and probably any movie. Um, now, but what is redemption? I mean, what he did not bring her planet back. It didn't
Right.
bring Obi-Wan back. It didn't
Right.
negate anything he had done. He did something good in his final
Mhm.
moments, and that is what it is. It's something good. It's not what he had been doing all those years. So it doesn't have to negate anything. That's not possible. I mean, that's not what redemption can ever be. Um, Acknowledging that he did something bad and then choosing, insofar as you can, he did, and so that's why it's compelling, I think.
I mean, what we're at this stakes that a dark like a Vader figure is doing evil. You're like it is it's you cannot redeem that. I mean, Hitler, Stalin, whomever, like they're about to die and they save their son. Actually, Stalin didn't save his son when he was a POW. That was the whole thing. And obviously, in real world morality, that doesn't do anything or much of anything at all. But I think the exaggerated nature in a movie is okay. It didn't work in the sequels when presumably Kylo Ren is responsible now for like scores of billions of people dying, not just maybe scores of millions. I mean, the numbers are so
Yeah, at
high
that
that
point the numbers,
if you
because I
think too
agree.
hard, it really becomes insane. So
Yeah, I agree about the kind of the hyperbolic nature of these scenarios. Like that's the whole point of fantasy, to heighten these things through melodrama. Um, but at least for me, it's always been compelling in the originals with the way it's played with Vader, and it feels less heroic and more of this desperate last ditch effort. Whereas with the new movies redeeming Kylo, it was very strange and didn't work for me.
no,
Nothing in that movie worked for me.
no.
Okay.
Except for when Wedge Antilles was there for 1 second, I was like, "Oh, sweet." That was all. That was literally all.
Yeah, yeah. But I've heard great things about Andor. I haven't had the pleasure yet. Did
One
you
of
watch that?
our non-Serviam people was just asking if any of us were watching, and I said no, but he was selling it, so I might check it out. In part because it's not. I mean, I always liked Boba Fett as much as the next Gal, but I was less inclined to watch that. But like a gritty Star Wars, like what I hoped Rogue One would be, and it got partway there. I would still be into that, and I do
Yeah,
enjoy The Mandalorian because how can you not?
I haven't watched that either.
Really?
No, I know I'm like years behind on that. The only show for Star Wars that we got into was Obi-Wan.
Mm.
Just which had its flaws, but Ewan McGregor is so fantastic, and that's the main reason we probably watched that one so far, and that's fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll get to that either. I just The
Oh no,
Mandalorian.
we have watched the different Star Wars shows, not
That's true. Mandalorian was so disconnected, at least initially, from anything else, and it had those
Mm.
delightful tropes that made the original Star Wars so good, where it's like classic, like archetypes,
Right.
um,
Yeah. No, Obi-Wan
westerns.
more. I feel like bridges, or at least attempts to bridge the prequels and the sequels in some ways in terms of their tone. It's more Shakespearean, like the prequels,
Mm,
and has and develops more of the lore to the central to the main storyline. Obviously, with Obi-Wan and Anakin, but I thought it did it in a fun way actually. And I don't like the prequels, but I like Ewan McGregor, and Obi-Wan had some great scenes. I'd be curious, what do you think of it as a fan of A New Hope so much?
yeah,
I know you are.
I mean, I love all of them, but I feel like for a while there, A New Hope was getting really underrated, and every time I watch it, I'm like, God, this movie's perfect, isn't it? It's almost perfect, and the pacing is weirdly adult and sort of slow and deliberate. The editing is perfect. I really do love that movie so much. I
I do
do,
love A New Hope. I agree with you.
yeah. It's actually been too long since I watched Return of the Jedi in particular, but I actually like the prequels a tiny bit now. I mean, they're a disaster,
Tiny bit.
but they are better than the sequels, all of the sequels to me, because the sequels are weird, nostalgia bait, committee crafted things. And the prequels are one guy's vision, and that includes all of the flaws that implies. But they are like they're someone's vision in a movie, and especially in like these days, like that's not that common anymore. We're getting more and more sort of committee made art. So even disaster art has its charms, I think. That's why I'm really forgiving of movies that people hated, like Don't Look Up, things like that, where I'm like, it's kind of
Mm,
sci-fi that's not
mm,
it's not a committee and stuff, and like good effort, people. If
mm.
nothing else, like good try.
Sure, I agree. The prequels are more interesting in because they have such a definitive vision, um, for sure.
Revenge of the
In some
Sith
ways.
has its moments. I'm more tolerant of melodrama than I was as a teenager when that movie came out, which is why
Hmm.
I now like the movie The Rock too. Like I was like too embarrassed by melodrama. Now I'm like, all right, if we're
Oh, I
doing
love
this, let's do it right.
some melodrama. I love sincere genuine films that are not undercutting themselves with a joke every 2 seconds. That's
Yeah,
too much of that now. And I love the MCU, but it most of it, but it often retreats to that, and it's
too
so
much
annoying.
so, definitely. And
So annoying.
those movies often frustrate me because they are several steps below what they could be pretty easily, and they could be something really good. Because I mean, comic books, yeah, they're totally everywhere now, and it's exhausting, but they are this very American thing and this very mythic thing. Every time I talk about this, I just think about Jordan Peterson now, which makes me so mad because fuck that guy.
Because of the mythology.
Ruining archetypes and myths. I'll just think about Daniel Jackson and Stargate instead. Maybe that'll help a little.
I think because they just announced now James Gunn and this other producer in charge of DC Studios. Did you see that? So I hope that
Yes, sort of.
continues. Yeah. No, they announced like as like the Kevin Feige role, these two over DC movies. So as a big fan of DC and the lore, I hope they can get it together. And one thing DC's had going for it that Marvel hasn't is more director-driven, unique films, but they haven't all been very good. Some of
Most
them,
of them, in fact, most of them have been bad, I think, honestly.
yeah, I mean, it depends. I guess we would have to go through them, but either way, I'm hoping they continue that kind of director-driven feel, while trying to do United Universe as well, because I love that.
I mean, what's his face? Oh my gosh, Henry Cavill. They're giving him another try.
Yeah.
And without Zack Snyder, I feel bad picking on Zack Snyder because like everyone I've ever heard of seems like, oh, he's nice. Like, what a nice guy. Had a personal tragedy. Joss Whedon, who I prefer, except now his essence has leaked all over into every movie. But like Zack Snyder is not a good movie maker, and he did such a bad job with Superman. And Henry Cavill is like a perfect looking man who has like could even have had the little Superman curl and everything. He's a nerd. He should have been a happy, dorkier Superman, and he could have done it in a different movie. And so if they give him that, that would be really great, because I always come back to Captain America and how easily that could have been a total disaster, totally unlikable, totally lame. And they obviously did such a good job with him. So of course they could do that with Superman.
I'm still thinking about the phrase Joss Whedon's essence leaking everywhere. No, there's so many good points there. We're on the same page. I don't know how they did Captain America in the 21st century. I don't know how they did a sincere, lovable, virtuous Captain America. And
Chris Evans did an awesome job. I mean, I think.
Yeah. And that is the lodestar for Superman. I'm with you. Joss sucks as a person, but I really like a lot of his art. Zach seems like a great person, but I dislike him.
So it is.
Damn you. Just why can't my artists and virtue always collide?
I know. Something Ayn Rand.
So another example. So I hope Henry Cavill does get a good shot at a more human Superman interpretation. I think that was the problem.
Superman is the only superhero that I can truly say I prefer in comic form. And I don't love the first Christopher Reeve Superman, which is the only one I've seen, which I'm going to remedy. In part because, and this sounds really stupid, the end of it, when Superman turns the entire planet backwards to save Lois Lane. And my husband and I have discussed this. I'm like, it's too much. Like, I know everything I've just seen is like a lot, but as I say when I'm making fun of my father being overly critical of movies, it's like, that couldn't happen, like, which is crazy, but even in a universe like that, you can go too far, and I genuinely think that goes too far.
Yeah, I mean,
it's also too low.
I love that movie.
I love Christopher Reeve's performance. I think is really good.
I like the choice to turn. He had to do something godlike at the end to me.
It's so big though. It's too big
to save Lois. I love it. The sequels get worse. When you're watching the sequels, don't forget to watch, because they released, in the 2000s, the Richard Donner cut
Mm.
which is I like Superman 2, but then the cut that they put together, Richard Donner's original footage, which has the Marlon Brando footage because he was cut out of the original sequel because of contract negotiations because he
Okay.
was insane. So the Richard Donner cut has Brando more, again, and some different stuff, and it's better.
Well,
Hilariously, it
that's on my
includes
list. Yeah.
because they had to hodgepodge it together years later, and it was never fully filmed. So one scene in there was actually like a test screening between Margot Kidder as Lois and Christopher Reeve as Clark. So their costuming is like inconsistent with the scenes surrounding it. I don't know.
That's
I'm going
very
on a weird
strange.
rant here, but
No, I can't picture that working at all. So that's actually really funny.
no, it's fine because the actors sell it so much. You just get enthralled. Those two, the actors, their chemistry. I just love that movie. It'd be hard for me to see a live action version of Superman top that. I also really like Superman and the Mole Men, which is technically the first feature-length film involving a superhero from the 50s with George Reeves, the 50s TV super. This was the TV movie that launched the show, and it's got this great 50s anti-McCarthyism, kind of anti-racism too, because the Mole Men are like these oppressed that the townsgoers like are basically prejudiced against and want to do violence against, and Superman, I love it in that one. It's a little more old school Superman, where he's not necessarily as warm and Boy Scouty as Christopher Reeve's version. That's still there, but he also has a quick. He doesn't have that much patience for the towngoers' racism. He's very quick to just be like, "You guys are idiots."
Yeah.
And
That's
kind of dole out that justice.
I'd like to watch that. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of us can picture the first Superman comic book cover, which involves Superman. I mean, was he just like lifting a car, right? And like,
yeah, I think it's famously not clear what that image is conveying, what he's doing.
Yeah,
because
I mean, I guess I never read the first version of Superman, and I've definitely heard that he's not quite as Boy Scouty, but you know, he's still probably not Zack Snyder's Superman.
No. I mean, that's the thing. I've read some of those early issues, not a lot of it. There's so many Superman comics. But you can definitely see, I mean, he was a bit more short-tempered. But Zack Snyder's take was more apathetic and kind of distant. And that's what people found alienating.
It was so weird, because I would love if it portrayed some people scared of Superman, even while he's, Boy Scout and kind. Because, all right, real-world acknowledgement that someone with that power would be scared and intimidating to even know that they're out there. But don't make Superman himself be a dour god figure. Honestly, the rot of that portrayal of Superman starts with the horrible version of his parents, which is the whole reason.
I think his mom is cool. I love.
But she's not great. Because she's like, you don't owe anybody anything, Clark. She's not super fuzzy either. His dad, that's just a train wreck. I mean, don't save children in a bus. Let me commit suicide in a tornado, even though you could clearly save me. The tornado makes no sense. The classic heart attack killing his father thing is so much more effective. It's so upsetting.
Very strange. Some of the decisions in that film.
So bad.
I really enjoy the Superman and Lois show on the CW.
You know what? I watched the first episode of that, and I immediately was annoyed because they kept talking about like reverse mortgages and like he had annoying teenagers. I was like, who is this for? Like, I don't need
Lucy. What?
I don't need like a 20-year-old Superman, but this is very like, I don't know.
So, okay, so let me give you let me sell you on this show. It's the reason for the annoying teenagers is because we've seen Superman in his early days. And so this is an older, more wizened Superman who is fundamentally like a family man. Most of the show is about him being a dad and being a husband. And so to me, this is a total refutation of the Snyder one because he's so human. The stories are much more human. The balance between his godlike powers and his human social roles are really fascinating and explored well. So I think you should give that a second shot. And yeah, maybe teenagers can be annoyed.
I think I should too, probably.
But
I don't love that Lois. I don't know, something about the first, but it was literally, I'm thinking the pilot, and pilots are never gonna, so
pilots can be good.
They can be, but they're rarely a sign of exactly how it's going to be for the rest of the show.
Right. That's
so
true.
like you almost have to watch more just to know what's up.
Yeah. But I really enjoy that show. I think if you're looking for a live action Superman that you would like, that fits the bill.
I mean, I've watched a lot of Smallville, so I can't talk. But Smallville has a great Lois and an even better Lex Luthor. So
I haven't seen Smallville.
I used to watch it with my mom, and she would get so sad that Lex is doomed to be evil because he's the best character by far. He's very multifaceted, and you really believe through most of it that if Clark had been honest about, you know, the superpowered incident that initially they meet, that Lex probably wouldn't have turned out to be a supervillain. But there was still that personality trait where you get why he's not trustworthy, you know, fully. Yeah. But he could have been. It's like, you know, it's like Greek tragedy shit. It's like,
well, I think that sounds very, as someone who hasn't seen it, that sounds very interesting because
that's the most interesting part of that show by far.
Well, I think that's cool because they're interesting foils in the idea that Lex in a different world could have been like Superman, could have been this humanitarian who uses his gifts for benevolent ends. So that show seems to play on that. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of dumb stuff and a woman who co-founded a sex cult. So, you know, it's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fair. That's my cat.
I mean, I figured it was your cat. That was a very classic meow.
Interested in the sex cult. Clearly.
That was a Nexium, that thing. Allison Mack from Smallville. It's basically, she used to be known as from Smallville, and now she is known as went to jail for like 3 years for
I have heard about that.
Branding women.
I thought you were saying in the show.
No, sadly.
But you were actually saying in your life, sadly. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
well, on the topic of horror, it is almost Halloween. I don't know when this episode's going to be released.
I don't know either, but we can admit that it's now currently almost Halloween, no matter when someone is watching it.
Well, it might be past Halloween when people are watching. That's my.
But in our moment in time,
our like truth.
Yes.
My truth is that it's almost Halloween.
Wow, mine too. Amazing.
But I've been binging some horror movies, a lot.
What do you got?
Well, I've always been a fan of the Halloween movies, so we've been actually watching through every fucking Halloween movie, of which there are 13, 12 if you just count Season of the Witch, the third one that didn't have Michael Myers is unconnected to everything else. And have you seen these? Well, okay, first of all, what are your thoughts on horror? And like, do you like the Halloween movies / what horror?
I've seen Halloween, like
the original,
John Carpenter, the original, and that's all.
Oh, you should just stop right there.
Maybe I will.
No, that's unfair because I really do like the franchise.
Yeah,
I've watched it since I was a kid, and they get so. I mean, like any horror franchise, you know, they have their insane developments, but they have their moments too.
Do you know what I don't like about not horror so much as specifically sort of slasher movies? Is that Jamie Lee Curtis's character is never safe. Like, all right, sequels happen, and sometimes that's good. But at the end of a horror movie, you know, if there's a final girl or something, it's, Laurie Strode, right? I want her to be that safe. I don't want her chased by Michael Myers for the next 40 years. It bothers me to have a character be sort of tormented endlessly through worse and worse sequels. There's something about that. Same with the Scream movies with Neve Campbell's character. I'm like, though with them, it's literally a different killer every time. So I was talking to my friend about this. Like, I would just like jump off a bridge at that point if you're just going to be tormented by an undead. Like, I don't know.
Well, in some ways, the new Halloween reboot, the Halloween 2018, which brought Laurie back, which brought Jamie Lee Curtis back, and brought John Carpenter back in like a producing role. That seems to play on that because that ignores all the other sequels and just is the original. And it's like 40 years later, and it's like dealing with Laurie having trauma and PTSD and kind of becoming almost a paranoid prepper because of that night, and you know, culminating and you know, finally a conflict. So, but that's fair. I mean, there's plenty of things to dislike about the slasher movie franchise. Really, no shortage of things to dislike about them. But
I mean, I don't know. Like, it goes back to like I hated the Star Wars sequels, and when I heard that the original, trio of heroes was going to be in it, I hated it because they ended really nicely to me, and there was that expanded universe. Like, life is hard enough. Like, sometimes I like having my heart broken, via fictional character, but sometimes I want my fictional characters to be safe,
Oh,
like,
okay,
and then
that's
their
fair.
lives, were like there was but they lived out and it was okay. Not
Like,
like,
let them rest in peace. Let the
yeah.
IPs and the characters. That's fair. Maybe I see many of my favorite long-standing fictional characters always get rebooted and reiterated because that's how comic book characters are. But with something like Star Wars, it's one singular ongoing storyline.
I mean,
Um,
arguably that did turn into basically a comic. I mean, it's a similar concept, but
but
the
there's
very,
still just one Luke. I mean, there's not going to be like an Elseworlds. I mean, maybe, but like usually
yeah,
that's mostly reserved for superheroes. Other characters could do that in practice, but um,
just let them
I
rest. Just let them have a nice life. They've paid their dues.
no, I very much. It's funny. I really disliked how they dealt with the original three because I thought having them back could be okay if it was in a minor role and it was more happy.
That was
Uh,
insane. Their decisions.
well, we're going to quickly get derailed on the Last Jedi though but we can absolutely agree that like Leia and Han were done dirty
The three of
and
them were never on
yeah,
screen together. You go to all that work,
I
that's
agree.
bananas
I
to not
agree.
occur to you.
That's very strange. I mean, one of the biggest blunders in movie production history is the sequels. I think, even though I like the second one a decent amount.
I mean, like, Mark Hamill does a phenomenal job, particularly in The Last Jedi, in acting. Harrison Ford actually, like, for a couple of years there, he was like asleep at work. Like, I feel like he actually tries a little in that first one, which I hate. He's bringing a little bit, but like, just I hate it so much.
Man, all
Um,
roads lead back to Star Wars. That's what we've. I tried to talk about horror, but
Good
we've,
Lord,
we've
yeah.
inevitably come back to the Star Wars.
I haven't even been thinking about Star Wars for like the past several years, and suddenly I'm just thinking about this, and I'm like, God damn it!
No,
I
every
hate
time
this.
you think about it, the missed opportunity. It's
I hate those movies because it's a twofold idea, which is here are these new characters, and they're even more awesome than the ones you liked. Look, Rey is a lady Jedi, and she's better than everyone. And like, look, here's a new Han Solo guy. Here's a new Darth Vader guy. So let's
yeah,
move on. Let's even talk in the script about how we're moving on from the old thing. But also, here are your old favorites. But also, they're all fucking dead. They're all fucking dead. You like that? Huh? Nostalgia? Oh, they're fucking dead. It's really weird. It's like a horrible combination of nostalgia bait and just fuck you. God, I
right.
hate it so
That's
much.
an interesting, actually, distinction breakdown. I agree. Especially, what really was the nail in the coffin was how the ninth totally invalidated six and totally invalidated the real thrust of what we were saying earlier is Anakin's insofar as kind of character could ever be redeemed or at least do anything good. Nine said it didn't even work. His
Yeah.
sacrifice was for in
God, I
vain.
hate that.
You know,
I hate that shit.
so it's a shame.
And that last movie was it was like, oh, it's kind of Voldemort-y, it's Harry Potter-y, it's kind of a ripoff of the Avengers. And I have such a deeper attachment to Star Wars characters, but like the moment in Avengers Endgame when like Captain America wields Thor's hammer, all you have to do is be vaguely aware that that's a big deal to totally get like that as a moment.
Yeah,
And everything in that last Star Wars movie was like trying to go there in terms of bigness, and none of it
yeah.
worked.
Oh, I agree. There's some weird parallels between Endgame and Rise of Skywalker.
Like they were copying someone
Yeah,
else's answers in a test, but they didn't actually understand the question.
that's a great analogy. Yeah, it's a shame. I really liked how Endgame wrapped things up, and I like Star Wars too, but I feel sorry for the real Star Wars fans out there. That I mean,
Right, you should feel sorry for me. I don't
I do feel sorry for you. Yes, for many reasons,
know. Me
including
too.
Star Wars. Um, maybe we should complain about other things
I
like
know.
Star Wars, like
But this, this is the real talk that listeners slash watchers are signing up for with us.
Yeah.
It's just how it's going to be. You know, if you
Oh
want to
yes.
only talk about philosophical quandaries and ethics, then you go to the Non Serviam main podcast. For whatever is going on with us, well, here it is. But now that my coffee's kicking in, I am mad about stuff besides Star Wars. But I
Hmm.
don't know how
Shocking.
I don't know how to segue to that right now because I'm still thinking about Star Wars.
Well, I think it's annoying. I don't know which annoyance should we discuss here. The idea of platforming someone who is like an open sophist, like just admits that they treat discourse like a strategy game in order to advance the current transphobic moral panic, makes no sense to me.
It would be weird to platform someone like that.
I
Okay.
We would never do that on this show.
The twist is that you, Corey, are actually
Oh no,
responsible for a moral panic that's sweeping the nation.
I
No, you're
it's
not.
not that moral panic.
That's all right. So what we are cryptically but not alluding to is that Corey pointed this out to me yesterday when we were prepping, our careful preparation for this podcast. That Reason magazine, where I briefly worked, had an interview with Chris Rufo, who is probably the guy responsible for the moral panic about critical race theory. But he's also a staunch in America. He's also a staunch advocate of trans slash drag queen moral panics. And Reason Magazine, a sort of respectable, serious political magazine, libertarian, whatever that entails, some right, some left shit. And two people from it interviewed Chris Rufo, and I have a lot of feelings about that. And one of which is, I don't think there's anyone on earth that you can say no one should ever interview, and that interviewing people absolutely isn't an endorsement. I'm very mixed on no platform things. I mean, who have I interviewed? I've interviewed Joe Arpaio and Milo Yiannopoulos at the same. It was at the RNC in 2016. I interviewed Ron Paul and a politician, for all that implies. And was I endorsing any of those people? Certainly not,
No.
especially Joe Arpaio, who is truly a monster. But at the same time, there's a right way and a wrong way to interview somebody. And I watched the interview with Rufo, and you can chime in about this, but what I saw was almost a naivete on Reason's part, because they were trying to talk about education policy, so they were very mixed on, like, they want school choice, but Nick Gillespie also had a thing about abolishing mandatory schooling, like, and how that would be cool, sort of. So again, there's like a mixed freedom leaning philosophy there, but they're talking to Rufo, who is unbelievably obnoxious and domineering of the entire conversation, by the way. They're talking to him like he is intellectually honest. Like, all he wants to do is talk about education policy. And to some extent, you have to take your interview subject seriously. Like, one of my favorite writers, John Ronson, had a whole book about that, where he interviews, people like David Icke, like, okay, so reptilian aliens are taking over. And maybe we've had too much of that in the last few years, but there's no point in smirking at your interview subject and not letting them say a thing. So, like, it's not an endorsement of Rufo that Reason was doing, but it's still not a good interview, I guess, is what it comes down to for me.
I completely agree that an interview does not entail endorsement. A platform does not entail endorsement. Um, and I think there's a lot of salient ways to go wrong with no platformism. But also, I think there's a lot of value in general to recognizing that when certain individuals are not interested in good faith discourse, and when they've been open about that in the past, you don't have to look hard to find that from this guy. So it makes it strange to then attempt a remotely sympathetic interview, rather than something more challenging, um, and something that doesn't just, lead your readers and your listeners and your viewers to become sympathetic fans and now go follow that person. I thought a great, and I don't know if did you watch the Jon Stewart's interview on with the Attorney General in Arkansas? I can't remember what a woman pushing cracking down on
Oh
on
no, you know what I
transgender.
meant to, I think.
I thought
I
that was
didn't
a
get.
good example. I have a lot of qualms with Jon Stewart, but that interview was going around, and I actually sat down and watched it, and I thought it was a really well done job. He let her speak, he let her
Mhm.
say everything, but he also pushed back hard, and wasn't this kind of empty formalistic thing, and certainly didn't treat her as like an authority, on really anything, let alone a moral authority or authority on these issues. And it was really good to me, showing how she had no idea what she was talking about, and what she was doing was awful. And he told her right to her face, I completely disagree with what you're doing, and I hope you stop." Um, to me, that's very commendable,
Mhm.
and it would be better.
What's weird is that I really thought that Gillespie in particular was better at interviewing than this. And the format was a streaming thing, so there was more crosstalk than there would have been, but they were also cross-talking because Rufo is thought it was his interview basically and kept trying to take over. Um,
To me, it's absurd that to treat it like Chris Rufo's issue is educational policy. No,
right.
that is downstream of his issue, and any surface level transparent agreement is completely accidental and unconnected based on the root issue of what Chris Rufo is about and what he pushes. That's what's so kind of annoying to me. It's like it reeks of like of trying to get a big name person on, and like digging and digging for some sort of common area to agree on, out in terms of outwardly facing. Uh, so I don't understand that.
Yeah, and even the tweets that were linking to it were very like, "Oh, is this good or bad?" You know, which I might forgive a little bit if the interview had been really deft, and it wasn't. Um,
Yeah,
they were
I
harder
don't.
on him than Gillespie was on Abigail Schreier, and Abigail Schreier, I also watched the interview with Gillespie, and Schreier wrote that moral panicky book about girls. I'm doing quotes. Turning into boys. You know, like poor little girls led astray. They got
Yeah,
trans. Um, and Gillespie's interview with her was like, I get why she fools people who are stupider than he is, because she seems very, very friendly and very, concerned and not a total moron. So, like, I get why she fools people who really haven't thought about this. But people I think I know are better than this being fooled. It's very strange, and I don't know if it's deliberate or not. Or are they never hiring me again? Oh well, I don't care. Yes, I do. No, it's fine. Um, but the important thing is, okay, well, so with Rufo, another weird detail about him is that he will tweet almost a look behind the curtain where he will suggest that people use a different word. I forget what it was about, like something about like, don't say drag queen, say like trans stripper, something really stupid where it's like, find something that sounds sexualized and also like scarier. And he's tweeted like, we've successfully tied critical race theory to like the worst definition of it, the worst association. So he's almost showing off about the artificiality of it. There was not a single question
yeah,
on the recent interview that has like a meta, like, okay, you're telling us this. Is this an artificial panic? Like, do you sincerely believe that this is a problem? Like, what does it suggest that you're sort of puppeteering it? I mean,
yeah.
there was nothing probing about that. It was purely, you education man, how do you feel about education? It was naive. That's the word for it. It's bizarre.
I think that's the problem with where you platform certain people and views and lends an implicit legitimacy to them in the realm of discourse. And if you're not going to challenge and push back on that hard and in a well-informed, challenging, clear manner, then I feel like the whole platforming thing is completely backfiring,
Mm-hmm.
and is being used to advance the other person's agenda beyond having a good faith discussion.
I mean, and I feel like everyone has a line, right? Like the way we talk about a lot of free speech or not really even free speech issues about, oh, cancellation and no one wants discourse. And it's like, well, everybody has a line somewhere. Even like the crankiest conservative who's mad about PC culture probably doesn't yell ethnic slurs, in public regularly. Like someone has a line of taste or decorum or like we all have a line somewhere. Like we're debating where it is, where it generally should be for public, whatever that means, and where it is personally for us. And it's literally fine if it's in different places. And that's sort of a weird distraction, I guess. But I'm trying to think how I was trying to get to interviewing somebody. Most people don't interview David Duke. Now, in a particular book, like the John Ronson one I love, he hangs out with some bona fide racist people. And it's this really cool atmospheric thing. It's a great book. It was a better book because there weren't as many books like that back then, I think. And some people are against doing that ever. And I can understand that. But in most contexts, particularly like a CBS-esque news context, like, so what's being a racist like, Tell us about being racist. Most people don't do that because they don't bother. So again, there's a line somewhere to somebody.
Yeah.
And Rufo is a newsworthy person, if nothing else.
Sure.
But I don't know,
But that doesn't necessarily mean a sympathetic interview. That could mean a lot of things.
I don't even think they meant to be as sympathetic as they kind of came off. But more sympathetic than they should be, definitely.
I think people, especially in the journalism sphere, can underrate the implicit legitimacy they lend to people even when they are innocently pursuing a good faith discourse themselves and genuinely don't endorse that person or everything they've ever said or done. And that can still be the case even if they're implicitly lending legitimacy to this, like as something to be debated or someone to be like argued with, as if they haven't, like you said, been upfront about the artificiality of their attempts. It's a shame, I guess, but something to learn from, I suppose, and nothing beyond. Libertarianism is a mixed world. I myself, for C4SS, for Mutual Exchange Radio, interviewed Elizabeth Brown last month, and I like a lot of Liz's articles and work, and enjoyed interviewing her.
And I talked to Jesse Walker on the Non Serviam Podcast, and Jesse is legit. I have no...
And really relevant because it is a conspiracy theory. What Chris Rufo's engaged in is conspiracy.
Absolutely.
If only Jesse Walker had interviewed Chris Rufo and
God, yeah,
that's
not really his the kind of thing he does, and then maybe that's fine. But yeah, if he did, that would have been something to watch, I think. Stupid.
Was there anything else on the checklist? I know there was an LP thing.
Oh yeah, more like there's something I can't let go about libertarian as a self-ID, that there have been many shenanigans in the Libertarian Party, which technically I was a dues-paying member for about a year, whereas I've self-ID'd as a libertarian since I was like 13. So that's not a lot of time in there. I have no interest in electoral politics. But there was the whole sort of takeover, as they say, from the Mises caucus, and ostensibly anti-war, but at the end of the day, very paleo-libertarian / even paleo-conservative, I would say. And a lot of their, even the National Party account tweets have been, I would say, purposefully alienating and edgelording people who they seem to assume will never be interested in libertarianism. And those people include women, trans people. I mean, there's a guy who's perpetually running for libertarian office who has basically been like, Peter Thiel's right about the 19th Amendment was a mistake, and only did he actually say only property-owning white males should vote? He might have said only property-owning males of a certain thing, but you know what? That's not good either. And they're dabbling with this in a way that it's already been done, for one thing, in the 90s, buddying up with what is now, well, I mean, whatever right wing is, I don't even know anymore. But just like that alliance they've already tried that, and it didn't work, and it made libertarianism look far right and creepy, which I'm starting to worry it might be. And I didn't want it to be. I really didn't, because I'm not far right and creepy. Darn it.
Well, I mean, electoral politics, not interested in. I don't even know if movement politics are worth it, I guess. Like, libertarianism has always had this problem. Every political ideology has nonsense and it's not just libertarianism. Everyone has its own unique failure modes, and we often discuss that with libertarianism because it's close to us. And it's unfortunate. It doesn't mean the term doesn't convey anything useful depending on the context. And it doesn't mean a lot of ideas or thinkers or books that get labeled under the libertarian title aren't useful or I don't agree with. But it does mean that movement politics are unwieldy. All you can do is speak for yourself and associate with who you think is worth associating with. But
yeah,
I've lost all, and it's not necessarily a cynical thing. I don't think movement what is the end goal of of a libertarian movement? If it's like earlier we were talking about withdrawing from the state. I think that's great. That doesn't always have to be explicitly libertarian in name or ideological. Although those ideas inform that strategy, I think, well. So, I think it's a shame. But what did you want to talk about the specific stand that the LP is taking, which is so weird and alienating and stupid?
Well, I think part of the thing is that they're bad at tweeting. They're bad at communicating. But also they're delighting when they get rage clicks, because that's how the internet works now.
Yeah.
But the most recent thing that troubled me was the LP National tweeting yesterday afternoon, China and Russia can't tax you, conscript you, seize your wealth, or throw you in a cage for a non-violent offense. Know who your real enemy is. And I've never been one for the word solidarity, but my God, what a lack of solidarity with people who suffer under authoritarian regimes that aren't America.
Yeah, the tweet only applies if you don't live in those countries, and in a very bare way. And at that point, what is the tweet saying? It's
only America matters. Only America is real. If you attribute every single protest movement to CIA American manipulation, you're still saying only America is real. Obviously the CIA exists. Obviously the CIA gets in all manner of shit, probably in the middle of certain movements. But, in Iran, say, do we really think those people aren't sincerely pissed at their regime? The woman who was killed, who kind of kicked off the protest there, was wearing a hijab, as far as I know. She wasn't wearing a hijab to the satisfaction of the morality police. But she, unfortunately, was a phenomenal, kickstart to this, because even, I think, moderate people in Iran are like, she was wearing her hijab, This is a very sincere feeling. And yeah, maybe the CIA is running around there. There are people, John Bolton style, who have been dreaming of invading Iran for decades. I know this, and the LP knows this. But how about a respect for human freedom and the desire for freedom that exists in you tweeting this, conceivably? It's the most basic, cowardly, Ron Paul in a pejorative sense, sort of like, if we say anything critical about a foreign country, it means we want to invade it. No, be real about it. Those are authoritarian regimes. And people in those regimes could be reading the tweet right now, because there's, there's ways to get around the internet blocking stuff in China and Russia. Just what a lack of respect. One thing I loved about Students for Liberty, the libertarian student group, the reason I know you, the reason I know half of the non-serving people who are at every meeting, all of that's Students for Liberty. I have to admit it to our lovely watchers. They have a bunch. They hit upon a slogan. Also, I accidentally stole your shirt that says this too, because you gave it to me to hold and I put it in my purse. And that's why I now have 3 shirts that say, "Don't tread on anyone." What a phenomenal slogan that has substance to it. What a great upgrade of the truly sullied Gadsden flag that says, "Don't tread on me." It's perfect. I love it so much.
I've always loved that slogan. Big fan of that slogan and its centrality to Students for Liberty. And I agree with what you're saying. I think on the one hand, I do think it's vitally important and obligatory to oppose the United States government using its intelligence agencies or military to go and regime change.
Mm-hmm.
We know that is not going to work out, and will hurt the people it's intending to help nominally more than it helps. But it's just as morally obligatory to not let that slip into just defending regimes that are existing and opposing them, opposing challenges to those regimes. I mean, that is an absurd fall in terms of. It's not at all implied by opposing American-directed regime change and thinking that sending in American operations and bombing people or things like that makes things better. But that slips into just viewing, well, everything that's negative about these regimes is actually American propaganda. No, it's just that all the regimes are terrible and in unique ways.
Or even that it doesn't matter. To even think about a foreign country's problems is to somehow lead to a U.S. intervention there. And it's the paleo attitude, the miserly stay-at-home attitude, the one that says travel isn't a human right, the one that says immigrants are bad. It's technically anti-interventionist in a way that is a bad foundation because it's not really about peace enough for those people, and it's certainly not about individual rights enough for those people.
No, I agree. It's about nationalism for many, and about mere prudence in terms of the well-being of your own nation or community, and as opposed to the universalism of like that phrase, "Don't tread on anyone." And it's vitally important to not let that phrase or that universalistic philosophy lend support, which people do use it to support, going in militarily and bombing and trying to force a regime change or some sort of counterproductive effort like that. So it can be hard to navigate, I think, and different ideas get used to lend support for other ideas, and then people dislike the conclusions, so then they dismiss the foundations or the arguments they've heard. But the universalism and "don't tread on anyone" implies straightforwardly that everyone has rights, that the American government going in and violating them through bombing isn't justified, but neither is their own local regime oppressing them justified.
I mean, it's not that complicated. I know, it's not as complicated as people tend to act like it is. In most cases, to condemn a dictator in you and I talking, or any random person tweeting, even a national party like that tweeting, because it's a relatively powerless party, you can say it clearly that those, any authoritarian regime is bad and is the enemy of freedom. Yeah. And that people in any place that are victimized by government, that's bad. You can say it. Stop being so terrified and reactionary about it.
And it's very selective, because I see these people make plenty of criticisms, often totally fine criticisms of, say, the Ukrainian government. But they're doing that just because that's counter to what they see as this American narrative, instead of just consistently opposing government.
It's just it's an opposite,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
a childish.
contrarianism, I believe in radical ideas, but I don't believe in them because it's contrary to what's popular. I mean,
Right,
even if they were
exactly.
popular, they would be right. But it's so easy to slip into that, I think, and then it just, is like toxic. It kind of deludes your whole thinking now. And I've seen it happen with
Absolutely. Who
that
hasn't at this
contrarianism kind
point?
of just seeping into the different facets, and so you just end up though being a mouthpiece for a different narrative.
Maybe some of them are okay with that. So one of my objections to what I saw as the left back in the day, or a social anarchist type of movements, and I still have an inkling of this feeling, is that I saw them putting the state and corporations and almost everything on the same level of bad, in a way that, and I still think that the worst power comes from the state, because the state endorses corporate power or it excuses it. Like most things, it is the worst example of a bad thing. But a lot of people that I once thought were on my side aren't really anti-authority. They're just anti-federal authority, or authority they don't like.
Yeah.
Genuinely, a lot of these people want localized tyranny. That's why Hans Hermann Hoppe is so fucking inexplicably popular. Or, authoritarian religious thought. Or the same people that correctly say the state doesn't own my kids. Absolutely. You're right. It doesn't. I own my kids. Hold on a sec.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not devoted to anti-authority. Like, I'm not, knee-jerk, like, good parents are okay. It's okay to be in charge of kids. Their brains are still growing. Like, there's a certain amount, but it's a stewardship with obligations. The way it is to pets. In the sense, but pets, it's a permanent, stewardship. And with children, it goes away. And there is more people in this world than I ever realized, because I was blessed to be not raised with religion. There are people who think their job is to break the will of children, to mold them into obeying. And maybe not obeying the federal government, but obeying their church, or their conservative values, or their parents, or people who are older. And it's not the same value it's not what I thought it was. It's not individualistic in the way that I thought we were doing, and apparently we're not doing that. We're doing.
Yeah. I love the phrase. I was blessed to be raised without religion. Yeah, I completely agree. And you thought we weren't going to get into any of these philosophical, ethical, but the issues of
Happens,
of children's rights and what that stewardship permits. That's tough.
It's a big one. It's an interesting one.
But it doesn't change the fact that, this is what I was saying before about agreeing on maybe some downstream conclusions on, okay, oppose American empire. Okay, great. Well, why? And disagreeing those upstream foundational things. And then now there's more and more issues where those foundational issues are leading astray, and there's more sophistication and nuance than just opposing American empire in this case. What about Russian empire? And so everyone's bullshit detector's been fuzzy, and so
it's gotten
very
worse.
unfortunate.
It feels like, at least among people I know and like. I will not to fully throw anyone under the bus, but yeah, people have gotten more confused, not less, or at least.
Yeah, that's
I don't
true.
know.
I'm definitely more confused than
I am.
This podcast, this friendship, this life, more confused now for sure.
I'm just confused by the fact that I have very definite, philosophical, political beliefs. I'm not confused about what I believe, but I think I'm confused about what everyone else is doing, even more than I used to be. So,
yeah.
Except you. I'm pretty, you're fine. You're fine. Keep it up.
Oh, good. I try not to be too confusing.
And something about the Trump era made everyone insane. The monkey's paw. To me, it was a monkey's paw thing where it was like, oh, you hate politicians? You want someone to basically make political power look stupid? Well, guess what we have for you? This fucking idiot, narcissist weirdo.
Yeah. I
Who's
think
going to be.
there's a big difference between losing trust on an individual and a social level and various institutions, and that not being replaced by trust in different institutions.
Yeah.
Maybe have to be built or created or brought into existence some way, but nevertheless, I'm not sure what can be gained by merely negation, by merely cynicism, and having no vision or even principled, sort of approach to alternative institutions. And I'm just going to distrust the current ones. I'm just going to reactively take whatever side is deemed contrarian by the populace at large. That's where does that go? What does it do?
I mean, and it comes like it affects everything in a way that there's a long history of medical shenanigans, unethical things. Science isn't perfect. I feel like I know that my turmeric pills help all of my orthopedic problems and my burgeoning carpal tunnel, even though there's not enough scientific studies to prove that actually is an anti-inflammatory. Natural medicine exists. Medical establishments can be very bad. But again, I only believe in natural medicine, and I don't believe anything the medical community tells me. It's not even thinking at that point. It's a pure reaction. And I have to remind myself to have sympathy for people who are afraid. I know someone who was raised on the border with Israel, coming from a non-Jewish community, who became more and more conspiracy minded, and he's very distressed by these conspiracies, and he believes them. And he grew up having a nearby army take pot shots at his family, or rubber bullets at least some of the time, but like he was raised being lied to and being oppressed. And I can't be like, well, sometimes you're not being lied to. I mean, I think a lot of these people, especially the powerless, they're not faking it. They're distressed and they're paranoid and they're confused, even when they're, decisive about it and confident sounding. And it's so sad.
I absolutely think conspiracists, the genuine conspiracists, the people not the people writing the books or on the television shows, I think they are often grifters and opportunists and profiteers. Mm-hmm. And that's what the genuine conspiracists don't see, that they're being taken in by alternative profiteers and grifters, not avoiding scams altogether. But those genuine conspiracists are genuine, and they believe. Why would they do these things that they don't believe? Why would they alienate their friends and family, and sometimes jobs, and sometimes why? No, I think they're living in paranoid stress, and I think it's very sad. And it is difficult to avoid, like I said, pure negation, pure contrarianism, while being able to understand where it's coming from. Because like you said, it's obvious why those things exist and why they're compelling, why pure negation is compelling to people who are powerless. And it's difficult to talk through that, I think, with people.
I mean, even in some cases, and I'm going to be, I'm obviously less sympathetic to racists and other bigots, but that stuff's a conspiracy as well. I think a lot of people, they think they've unlocked something, and everything else falls into place. X group, are bad, and they're the cause of the problems. Now I understand. Now I get how it works.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to understand movements like Nazism and fascism without understanding them as a kind of conspiracy movement, ultimately.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And it bounds together racism and bigotry with lots of other social critiques and strains of contrarianism.
And I both think that people want to be free, and there's an instinct towards freedom, and there's an instinct towards collectivism, collective blame, collective movements. And both of us, there are two wolves within us, and they're, it's the collectivist wolf and the individualist wolf, and they are fighting. So I don't know how to resolve that, I guess.
Well,
We're all.
I think sometimes it's, I mean, the dichotomy you were saying, don't tread on me versus don't tread on anyone. It's easier to stand up for freedom when it's your freedom. It's easier to see when it's violated, when it's your freedom. It's harder to see it when it's, I know it's not impossible. I think people are responsible when they blind themselves to violations of other people's freedom. But it's easier to see your own and then to value your own and to get caught in that sort of mindset, I suppose.
Like what, some old person says, when you have your first job and see how much they take from taxes, then you'll understand, which is annoying, but there's something to that, And
yeah.
I mean, there's an empathy our empathy centers are atrophied and weak. I think most humans could be a lot more robust in their empathy, and things like nationalism and tribalism of any kind. And again, there's a human inkling to be scared and suspicious of the outsider, but I'm not a biological determinist. That's fucking stupid. And there's also an inkling to be kind and good and trade and exchange and talk and stuff. So again, there's this fight going on, but these institutions like statism make that so much worse than it would be, because we're on this team and you're on that team. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think both inclinations are there. I think it's silly to reduce us to one or the other, and it's silly to ignore how those inclinations are developed or cultivated or strengthened, or the alternative, or weakened by our surroundings, by institutions, by our environment, and the way they're channeled. Because what would the conspiracists say? Well, they wouldn't say they deny empathy, right? They have empathy for imagined victims in many ways.
Sometimes real ones mixed in with.
Well, very much to give those often a grain of truth there too, that which is what people hook onto and then extrapolate wildly from. So it's sort of like the empathy needs to be redirected or checked against reality in some way.
Yeah, that's the problem too. Like, I was thinking of the deep state again, and the deep state is real, but the way it's talked about.
Yeah, like what do people mean by that phrase? And
it's the way it's talked about is not real by most people, and the way it's increased as this figure, and like, well, Q will bring it down, whatever the fuck that is all about and stuff.
Yeah, it's a shame that anti-CIA sentiment or anti-FBI sentiment is like now sometimes hijacked and associated with conspiracists or right-wing extremists or whatever, when those are good sentiments, and have historically though more been on the left, and still are, but nevertheless being hijacked in a conspiracist narrative where those things are merely tools of a cabal.
And mainstream Democrats now just, hug the FBI. You've never done anything bad in your life. You're perfect.
Yeah, it's caused all of the non-contrarians to reactively cling to institutions which we do know are terrible in many ways and could be changed. It's not always terrible in the way that the conspiracists think. Not usually.
I wish somebody who remembers the 90s as an adult could speak to this better, but my sense of what the right now, hating the feds or saying they do or thinking they do, but that guy wanted to defund the police, is a very 90s thing. It's a very sort of coming out of Randy Weaver / Timothy McVeigh, not to equate those two people, sort of movements where it's this very inconsistent principle thing, this 90s paranoid conservative thing. And I feel like that's sort of back, in the way paleo stuff. I don't ever know.
Like you said, I mean, it's that dissonance of the national authority I'm against, but my local sheriff is on my side.
Or he's somehow okay in some way, or he's not in on it, whatever it is. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And I find that some ways that's harder for me to counter than like neocon stuff. You know, I'm getting nostalgic for being a Bush hating teen. It was all so
Yeah.
simple back then. But like, I would say that neocons use more language of libertarian moderates, and they co-opt that. In some ways, farther right people almost co-opt more radical, more left language in some ways. There's the horrible horseshoe theory thing going on where, you know, supposed leftists and like Tucker Carlson are now on the same side, quasi, and they're sometimes using word, you know, there's truth mixed in there about the FBI being terrible and certain things, and then it's contaminated by racism, xenophobia, transphobia stuff. And I want anti-government people to be really anti-government and to be on my side, but obviously there's a whole contingent, a bigger contingent probably, who isn't. And
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
It's just so much easier, and this is everywhere. And horseshoe theory, I think, has some truths, but sometimes oversimplifies.
Sure.
But it's much easier, especially in a specific historical moment, to be anti-X government, not anti-government as a rule. And radical movements on left and right and revolutions have always been able to achieve anti-specific historical government for whatever reason, for often rightful reasons because of their evils. But then they go and implement some other government that's terrible in different ways, or at least have no vision of alternative institutions that could realize some universal values. It's just anti this one embodied villain that I think that we just need to topple and replace with someone on my side.
Right, and that's it. It always goes back to that.
Yeah.
And that's almost like a mainstream Democrat idea. Well, I don't like him, so I want him. But, you know, when the guy I like is using all of his powers in every way, and sometimes, as we said before, with like, you know, Obama and the Dreamers, like that can be for a good thing. But it's complete naivete and this like, surely someone I hate will never be in charge, so let's make the federal government as big as possible. This will never backfire.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it almost always is for everyone is, well, I want my guy at the top. And yeah, there could be a worse guy or a less worse guy, but that's still not a solution. It's a, you know, it's a very small Band-Aid on a very gaping, fatal wound.
Yeah, and it's all, I think, you people often inspired by and point to concrete successes of revolutions and history that are able to topple specific governments, but are not able to install any universalist replacement. It's whether it's revolutionaries in colonial America or Bolsheviks. Some of them, like Lenin, were even, you know, looked fondly on the American revolutionaries and their ability to topple the British government.
Sure.
And this is why you get stuff too, like you talk about horseshoe theory with Rothbard praising Che because he was revolutionary.
The first Rothbard out of 5 or 6 Rothbards, all named Murray, but very different people.
And that kind of strangeness, I think, I mean, that's very indicative of the current environment of people who fairly Rothbardian on various things, for good or bad, who just end up apologizing for the any non-American regime or any regime caught up in a geopolitical conflict with America, instead of just opposing them all and understanding the unique ways in which they're bad. And Rothbard was really bad on that. He was good at opposing the American empire, but led him astray into these apologetics.
What I associate with tankies of him. Again, not everything's a horseshoe, but some things definitely are.
Yeah.
And I always go back to, again, this is from a libertarian foundation, not to alienate our people watching who have never been involved in that, but that's where we're coming from here. I remember an essay about the question of whether a racist can be a libertarian. And the answer was kind of, but it's a really bad foundation. And I think that's sort of true in that, and thankfully there are plenty of cowardly, nonviolent racists out there, obviously, like ones who don't want to do anything about it or even reveal it that much. I mean, that bleeds into other stuff. It's not a good thing, but not every racist or even fascist or Nazi is actually doing much about it, which, let's keep that up, boys. But it's a bad foundation because it's a rotten floorboard, and then you fall easily into authoritarianism.
Well, I don't even think it can be a foundation for it. It's because it is just don't tread on me. It's negation. It's against X government. It's not don't tread on anyone. There's Amon Bailey in those discussions. I remember those discussions. People would redefine libertarianism as these are like an abstract set of ideas about freedom, which everyone deserves, versus like in your own life, like what activities are you involved in, and do they break my version of the non-aggression principle? And if they don't, well, you're a libertarian. This is how people were saying Nazis could be libertarians if they, in practice, don't break the. It's like, right, but their ideology is Nazism. Isn't that what we were talking about? The ideology. Right. So that's what's so annoying about the discussions. Like, it's plenty of people go around living peaceful lives. That doesn't mean they all believe in libertarian ideas, as we're talking about that term.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being too broad here, I guess. I mean, some of it comes back to my dislike of dehumanizing racists, in part because I love a good redemption story, and they have happened, and also because I have just enough of a touch of a, right-winger from the 90s to be upset about Ruby Ridge, and having read a whole book about it that is really thorough, I can say that family was super racist and had a terrible, warped racist Christianity, and they were very like just kind of a mess. But what didn't help is killing half of them, and that didn't help. Don't do that.
I
would say it's not like, I guess it's not like, and that's why the Weavers were libertarians or anarchists. It's that they were kind of not doing anything except associating with other people with bad ideas.
Yeah.
In a way that, or at least on the family level, it's the feds who came in and brought the violence.
Yeah.
And I need like a dose of, you have to think of people who are unsympathetic in certain ways, and you have to not fall into a trap of saying it's okay to commit violence on them.
Yeah. I've excised from my vocabulary describing things that people did or do as inhuman, because it's literally not accurate. And so I agree with you. We shouldn't dehumanize racists. We shouldn't dehumanize any humans. I don't care who it is. It's one, not accurate, because it's concealing the fact that, well, humans do these things and are capable of these things. And it's also, like you said, it makes it much easier to dehumanize people once you start dehumanizing one person. I mean, now, it doesn't mean you can't staunchly, principally oppose their ideas. Doesn't mean you can't engage in self-defensive violence against people who have these ideas, of which there are many cases, of which, and I think, these are, racism and sexism are still institutions that dominate our lives and require resistance. I don't think dehumanizing individuals gets us anywhere in that.
I definitely called Joe Arpaio a racist at the beginning of a monster at the beginning of this. And as I did it, I was like, I used to not say things like that for exactly the reason you just said. It's almost a cop-out for people who do bad. So he does monstrous things. He did evil.
Yeah. I mean, monster. I guess people can be monsters.
I mean, again, that's a whole other road.
I don't know if that's...
What is a monster? A metaphorical, since they don't exist,
Yeah.
But yeah, it lets them off the hook. And there are reasons why, like, I love the movie Downfall, because it doesn't make you sympathize with Hitler, but it humanizes him in the sense that...
What movie?
The movie Downfall. It's about the last days of Hitler. It's a German movie.
Okay.
And the actor who plays Hitler is so fucking good. He's amazing.
Okay. Is that what that meme is from that I see shared a
Yes,
lot?
yes.
Okay, yeah, so I'm familiar with that, but I've never
Early
seen that
meme.
movie.
Yeah, and the movie's so good that meme, like, I don't even think about that meme if I watch it. But it makes you see Hitler as a human, and that's really spooky
Yeah,
because you're like, yeah,
yeah, it's spooky. It
sure
is.
was. Look at him petting his dog and smiling at his secretary, like just weird shit like that.
Well,
And then look at, yeah, I didn't. I was. Isn't that almost the opposite? It's a cartoony story. Like, it's not. I mean, yeah. Okay, so I really kind of want to keep talking to Corey forever, but technically this was supposed to be called the Anti-Power Hour, and
oh yeah, you're right.
and we're anarchists, so we don't actually have to obey the title of our own show.
That's true.
However, I am hungry and should probably go outside and things like that. Corey's already outside, so he's ahead of the game. But
Yeah, I'm gonna
yeah,
go inside.
wow, what a subversive, what a
Very contrarian right here.
yeah. But I feel like this was a meandering success, and I
Yeah, we
feel
did it.
like we're gonna do it again. Turns
Yeah,
out.
let's do it again.
I mean, I had thought we would aim for kind of like a monthly thing, which I don't
Yeah,
think is that tall of an order.
no.
And maybe we'll be a little more. We started with Batman and ended with Hitler, but that sounds about right,
Yeah,
actually.
that's fine.
Next time we'll start with
Oh,
Hitler and end with
conversation
Batman.
for me. Oh, that's talk about subversive.
That's usually the way I go, actually. So this was the weird one. Um, I don't know, Corey. Do you want to plug yourself or your writings or
Oh yeah.
another thing?
Yeah, everyone can follow me on Twitter, Corey Massimino, or Google my name. You can find my writings across various sites there. And
And you
I've been
should.
hosting the C4SS podcast sometimes, Mutual Exchange Radio. So that's been fun if you want to look that up.
And we do love C4SS. They are our friends.
Yes,
Hello,
and we love Non
C4SS.
Serviam. The love is
Beautiful.
mutual.
The love. Mutual. Appropriate. Um, and yeah, remember to follow Non Serviam on Twitter.
Yeah, and yourself.
Non Serviam Media on all one word. And I'm Lucy Stagg, LucyStag. Also,
You don't even.
all
You sound like
one
you
word.
don't want anyone to follow you. The way you're.
No, don't look at me.
No, Lucy's a pretty good follow. She's okay.
Yeah, it's true. I am. Corey's all right. Sometimes his words get a little too fancy for me, but that's all right. Usually I get the gist. Too academic. All right, let's wrap this up. Dang it. This has been the Lucy and Corey Anti-Power Hour.
Half.
Goodbye. And
Thanks for watching/listening.
yeah. See you
next
next time.